Welcome back to the program. You know, I've wanted to do this interview for quite a long time, and I've waited just long enough, I reckon. And that is a fellow called Craig Laundy. Now, the Laundy family have been in the hotels business for 3 generations. There was Arthur Sr. and Veronica Laundy. They started the business in 1945. They had the Sackville pub in Rozelle. It then went through to Arthur Jr., had his own leasehold of the Royal Exhibition pub in Surrey Hills. Then Arthur Sr. died in a light plane crash he was piloting. Arthur Jr., he was put into control. All of those pubs around the place in Yagoona, the Hume Hotel, the Twin Willows, they were around the place. Arthur Jr., it was invested in 2004 as an Order of Australia, basically. He was further recognised by the National Australian Hotels Association as Hotelier of the Year. Guess what? No surprise here, the son, Craig, also in the pub game, has had to manage them all. But Craig then did a little bit of a U-turn in his own career. And that was the ALP has held the seat of Reid in Western Sydney, basically spanning the Parramatta River and Drummoyne, Rod Point, all sorts of different places, for the past 91 years. That was until the last federal election when Craig Laundy grabbed the seat of Reid from the ALP. And he's on the line right now. Hello, Craig. How are you?
Ross, very well, mate.
Listen, I just want to go to one thing.
Yep.
I mean, winning that seat in its own right, were you surprised that you did it? Were you surprised that you found yourself in federal parliament?
Look, it was always going to be a tough ask. However, I'm a third-generation member of the electorate. I'm raising, Susie and I are raising the 3 kids there. We're very involved community-wise, not because I ever thought I'd be in politics, just because, like everyone, we just love our kids. So the soccer teams I've coached, my father coached my teams there. You know, we've been at church in the area, school, charities. Just like everyone, you have tentacles go through the community. And look, I had a great grassroots base from which to work and launch an assault. And I was just lucky, you know, God willing, that I got there.
Do you reckon also that the demographic of this part of Western Sydney has changed dramatically? We know that many of the suburbs now would have an average house price of more than $1 million. But you think about some of these places, Concord, you got Chiswick, Cabaretta, Canada Bay, parts of Burwood that span it. Parts of Auburn even are now becoming very wealthy. You've got Rhodes, you've got, say, parts of Newington, bits of Silverwater, Sydney Olympic Park with all of those apartments there. Is it also that you believe that the demographic is shifting and that there are more people with aspirations and perhaps even greater wealth than in the past?
I do, Ross, but one step further, I think there are more and more people in my seat that are operating small and family businesses.
And that's the key, because that's exactly what you had done. And people recognised that you'd got your hands dirty in a family business, as it were, and that you really understood that it was something quite different to employ people, to get up and go to work and maybe not get paid yourself while the staff got paid.
And Ross, I argued that, and I could have a full and frank discussion with people of like minds, and also argue that I was prepared to turn my back on my career because, you know, I didn't think enough people down in Parliament had done what these people were doing, and then by default what I had done.
So there's my next question for you. You suddenly get to Parliament House, you're elected the member for Reid, and you're sitting in there, you've given up the pub business for the time that you're in politics. Is it a situation where more business people should be prepared to go to politics to actually try and make change, and perhaps some of their practical experience would actually help in the long term the whole community?
Ross, there's only about a dozen times a day in the last 6 months I've thought to myself, what the hell am I doing? But the reality is that I've been raised, there are 2 things you can do in life. You can sit on the sidelines and criticise, and for 42 years I've done that, or you can put up your hand and get involved. If you want to make change, at times you've got to be prepared to roll up your sleeves and have a crack. And I would encourage, you know, it is the more people we can entice away from their career for as short a time as maybe 1 election, 2 elections, as long as the people want them. I argue that we have a narrow debate in this country because of a narrow array of backgrounds, and we need sensible debate. Our country's at a crossroads, and I would argue the more commercial experience that we can have on the floor of Parliament, the better debate and the better outcomes I think we'll get.
And the second thing is also having that practical experience, because one of the things, and even one of the criticisms of the last government, was that there was virtually nobody there who'd ever employed anybody in their lives, and so as a result didn't know what it was like to make money or lose money.
Ross, I couldn't agree with you more. And look at the quality of the debate over the last 6 months. I mean, Holden, 2,500 jobs, $500 million. SPC, 760 jobs, $25 million. Qantas, 5,000 jobs, $3 billion. My question, and I keep yelling this down there to my colleagues, if a small or family business person goes broke, where is government to support them? And you know, this is they are the engine room of our economy. 70% of the workforce of the 11.6 million people employed in Australia are employed by SMEs. And whilst we have the debate with Labor about the big end of town, the unionised workforce, the commercial reality is that red tape, regulation, penalty rates, banks, the role that banks play in our economy. This is where I feel I can add some value in talking with my colleagues down there to hopefully come up with sensible policy that will allow government to get out of the way and let SMEs do what they've always done in our economy, and that is employ people.
I would have thought, being in the pub business and running pubs over the years, you would have been very well equipped for the hurly-burly of question time. It does get a bit out of control down there.
Ross, it is. I quite often laugh with my father. He says, look, how's it going? The one big change I've noted, when I was working for Dad, you know, you would have disagreements with people, but ultimately you own the premises, and you could turn around and say, get out. The problem with politics is that whilst people are hurling abuse at you, you've got to bite your tongue and be polite. And I'm talking more on the electorate side. I have people yell and scream at me on a daily basis, and in my old job I could turn around and say, hey, listen, if you don't like it, get lost. But now I listen, and I obviously take into consideration what they're saying, and I have to be a lot more low-key, if you like.
I can understand that. The other thing also is, how do you find it in a family business when decisions are made, they're made quickly? In other words, you might think about things and you go, right, let's do it now, we're going to do it this way. In politics, in the whole world of bureaucracy, it works at a glacial speed. Are you coping with that?
It's unbelievably frustrating. Ross, I'll go one step further. Where I mentioned earlier about broadening the background of people involved, our system is that crazy that we have people that don't have a lot of commercial experience. And so what do? We give them a bureaucracy to advise them. And guess what? Those people don't have any commercial experience. So, you know, it becomes a case of, and I've seen it firsthand, and my job as a backbencher, I'm in a great position to challenge the ministers of the day in my team to think commercially and to take on the bureaucracy, because the last thing we can afford in the position we find ourselves in is the blind leading the blind. And unfortunately, historically, with my criticism of politics has been with bureaucracy leading, playing that advisory role to government. That is, in a lot of cases, what we've had. Okay,
one last subject. I know that you were part of a meeting with Tony Abbott and also 10 Western Sydney MPs in regards to the second Sydney airport in Western Sydney at Badgerys Creek. Will it ever happen?
Ross, it will, but I just want to quickly correct. That was a discussion. The thing I like about the PM is two things. Firstly, he's consultative, as is clearly being shown by the correct reporting of this story. But secondly, the discussion was about Western Sydney as a whole. And that is how government, and it transcended electoral cycles. I complain incessantly that politicians are governed by electoral cycles. This was a 20-year vision of Western Sydney. There will be 1.3 million more people there. There needs to be infrastructure across the board, including airport, and this will be the home. It is today the third biggest economy we have in Australia. It will only get bigger with time, and I applaud the Prime Minister for having this committee and having the vision to have the hard discussions that will transcend 20 years, not just the next 3.
Well, I've got to tell you, Craig Laundy, I've been wanting to do that interview for a long time. I'm so pleased we did it. Practical experience on the ground in running business, understanding what it's like to run a family business, and now in Canberra, trying to agitate as much as possible to get necessary change there as well. And Craig Laundy, great to have you on the program.
Only ever a phone call away, Ross.